Hi everyone, it's BritSimon here. So I thought I'd record a video after I've just received over the last couple of days a couple of interesting questions. One from a user on my blog, I think it's Stoic Turk, and a couple of people have been trying to understand the case density and holes theory and how that might affect DV2025. And I think it's worth discussing because some of you, as I've mentioned before, may be nervous about your case numbers. But although we know more about case numbers now than we usually do at this time of year, that's because of the case number survey. We know the case number ranges, right? Let's say in Africa, we know that the case numbers start at 1 and go up to about 100,000. We know that. And in Europe, it appears that the case numbers go up to about 41,000. There are a few outliers above that, so there might be some more numbers above that, but at the moment I'm thinking it's 41,000, and so on. We've got a good idea of the ranges of the numbers. But some people are focusing on the numbers and looking back at historical years and looking at the numbers and not really understanding what they're looking at in terms of comparison, and don't really understand what is going to be the more important point, which is how many selectees that we have within the year. So I thought I'd show you some data and some graphs actually from previous years that will help me explain exactly the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so I'm going to start off by showing you a chart which is the data that we extract from SEAC that is presented by Zarthisius on his website. He extracts this data and presents it, and he has done for a number of years. We've got a lot of that data that we can look at. And from that data, you can see some things here. So in DV 2018, there were 49,392 people selected for AF region, Africa. And you can see that the highest case number was, and this is the highest case number of selectees, was about 53,000. Now, we have twice as many case numbers this year. Does that mean that we're going to have twice as many selectees? Will we have nearly 100,000 selectees? No, it doesn't mean that. And the number of selectees is frankly more important than the case number ranges. And that's really what I'm hoping you'll understand in a few minutes here. So if we look at DV 2018, you can see that we had a case number at the top of about 53,000. As we go to, we're going to go through some of the other years. We're going to have a look at some of the other years and see some of those years, right? So if we look at DV 2019, there were 38,000 and so selectees, and the case numbers finished up by about 48,000. In DV 2020, there were a very low number of selectees, 31,500 selectees, but the case numbers went up to 74,000. That's odd, right? And if we look at the DV 2021, 53,600 selectees, and the case numbers went up to 88,000, 89,000. It's like, okay, it's quite a lot of selectees, but it's a massive number, right? Why is that such a high number? And as we come through to more modern times, we can see that we had 49,000 selectees in DV 2022. Highest case number here, if you look to the right of the chart, was about 65,000. In DV 2023, we had the highest case number to the right of the chart here at about 64,000 with 49,000 selectees. And in DV 2024, this one's the sort of crazy one. We have a case number. There's a case number of 123,000 in DV 2024, and we have 55,000 selectees, right? Now, if we just, for a moment, even just look at the difference between 23 and 24. In 23, we had 49,000 selectees. Now in 24, we've got 6,000 more selectees or so, nearly 6,000 more. So about 10% more, 10, 12% more than we had in DV 2023. But the case numbers went from 65,000 to 123,000. How did that happen, right? The case numbers doubled essentially doubled, and we only had 10% more selectees. Now, if you're standing in a line of people and you're waiting for something, right? What is not important to you is the ticket with the number that they give you to say, here's your place in line. It doesn't matter what that number is if that number is not a consecutive number. What matters is how many people are in the line before you, right? So maybe there's 50 people in the line and your number, you're the 50th person in the line, right? But you may have ticket number 175, right? Because they're giving out ticket numbers that maybe aren't all consecutive. There's some holes in between the numbers, and that's precisely what happens in DV lottery. There are holes between the number. Now, I've explained this in an article in, I think, 2015. I wrote an article about holes theory. I call it holes theory, but this is a theory in the scientific use of the word, in that we know for certain, we know that this actually happens. We know holes exist, and we know why they exist, and so on. So the fact that there are holes between the numbers, that the numbers are not consecutive, is not up for grabs. That's absolutely certain, right? There is no such thing as a year with no holes, but there are differences in the number of holes year to year, and that makes a big difference. So in DV 2024 compared to DV 2023, we have case numbers that are much higher in case number, with only 10-12% more selectees in Africa, right? Now, let's just go back again and look at 2018 and have a look at something here. So in 2018, if we look at any of these charts, the blue color is holes, actually. Any other color is a real case, but the blue color shows holes. And what's important for us to have a look at, just to understand this at the moment, is that the starting holes rate was a little bit less than 20% in DV 2018. There were over 80% of the cases as a starting holes rate were real case numbers. So that means out of every 1,000 cases, about 800 of those cases, out of every 1,000 case numbers, about 800 of those case numbers were in fact real cases. The other 200 case numbers were holes, randomly distributed within that range, right? And you can also see that the amount of blue on this chart increases in later number ranges, right? And I call this these sort of drops in density of real cases, or increases in holes. I call those cliffs. And you can see that there's a sort of weird cliff there. That's probably a couple of countries being blocked. There's another sort of plateau, if you like, along here, then another cliff, another plateau, and so on. And so there is a shape to each year that goes along and sort of makes a little chart for us, right? But we can see that the starting point in 2018 for the number of holes was a bit less than 20%. As we go through the years, if we look at that same starting point, there's more blue in the beginning, more holes per 1,000 cases in the beginning. So that's DV 2019, DV 2018. There's tons of blue, right? DV 2020. Sorry, in DV 2020, there's tons of blue. What caused that? I'll come back to that maybe, but that's in DV 2020. In DV 2021. About 50% of the cases to start with were holes, and by the time we got to the end here, less than 20% were real cases. Actually, 80% of the cases were holes, right? DV 2022, below 60%, probably about 55% of real cases, or 45% of holes. 23 started off at around about 50%, 50% holes, 50% real cases. And 24 started off at about 40% real cases, 60% holes, and went down to about, at this point, over the whole range, went down and latent case numbers to about 17%. 17% meaning that 83% of every 1,000 cases in the later number ranges were holes, right? Case numbers didn't exist. Okay. So you're understanding then, I hope, that the number of holes we get in a particular number range is very important. It changes how many real cases there are in the range. So whilst we currently know the number ranges for each of the regions, at least the first 4 regions, whilst we know the number ranges, we don't know the selectee numbers. Now, from the selectee numbers, we could find out how many cases we would expect, because we know, roughly speaking, how many derivatives appear on each case, right? When we talk about 55,000 selectees for AF region, we know that less than 2 people are on every case on average, and so there would be about 27,000 cases in DV2024, a bit less than that. And we know the average number of people per case in each of the regions, and we tend to split that up in regions. And it can vary quite a lot, from about 1.75 people per case, which I think is about right in Asia, and about 2.25 people per case in Europe. Now, that's the derivative rate. I often refer to that as the derivative rate. So if we know the number of selectees in a region, which we will know in July or August of this year, and we apply a little bit of very simple math and just say, okay, how many derivatives or how many people per case are there? Let's say they said we had, I don't know, 40,000 people in Europe. If we divided that number by 2.25, it would give us the number of cases we expect. And since we also know the case number ranges, we could figure out roughly what percentage of holes we're going to have, at least overall. Now, we wouldn't be able to tell what the distribution is. We wouldn't be able to tell yet in July or August what the shape of that is, or the distribution, what the starting number of holes is, and so on. But it's actually a lot more information than we have today, and it will be enough information when we have that to start making some reasonable assumptions about which case numbers could be too high. We won't be able to be precise yet, because we won't have that distribution, that real shape or a graph like this. We won't have that until January the 1st of 2025. That's when that data becomes available to us. So we won't know everything in July or August, but we will know more than we know today. And if you also look at the years here, as I sort of go back through the years, and keep your eye on the number at the top of the page about how many selectees there are, that number can vary greatly. Right? It's 55,000 in the most recent DV process, DV2024, 49,000 for the previous 2, 53,000. Then it was only 31,000 people in DV2020, 38,000 in 2019, and 49,000 in 2018. Now, if you want to see selectee numbers for each region, I have all of that on my blog under the historical visa bulletin numbers. I'll show you that in a moment. But you can have a look at all of that data there, and you can see that the government vary their numbers of selectees greatly from year to year. So if we come to BritSimon Says, which of course everybody's got that plugged into their favorites, right? Just like me. You can come down here and you can see I've been collecting for a number of years. I've been collecting the visa bulletin numbers, but I also added for each year the number of people selected in each region and the number of global selectees in each region. So for Africa, here are the numbers that I just had on that chart: 55,000, 49,000, and so on. And you can see I've got the numbers collected back until 2014, which was actually my year. That was when I was a DV lottery derivative, as my wife was the winner. So you can see in that year, Africa had 61,942 selectees, like huge number. There was a lot of selectees in that year. That was a very worrying year, and I was in that year, but managed to get through, obviously. And so you can see how numbers changed year to year. So we know that selectee numbers change. We know the number ranges, but we won't know what the selectee numbers are for this year until July or August. So you really need to hang on, before you make judgments, etc., about what your case number is, and without driving yourself too crazy looking at these previous years, because you might get hung up and try. People do this all the time, and they will continue to do it all year. People that I consider to be very switched on about this process will come along to me and say, hey, the visa bulletin is acting just like 2014 or just like 2015 or something like that. So it must mean the same, right? That means I can expect this jump next month. It's not like that. Every year is different. There's different factors that affect every year. And we have to sort of, be aware of that. And not get too hung up on trying to compare one year to another. Although every year, all the regions reset and start at number one. So they all start in the same place, right? So it's not a big surprise when there's some similarity between the number changes month to month, because they all start at the same place, right? So, okay, let me just switch back to my presentation here. Let me make that bigger, and let me swap that round. Let's swap that. Yeah, this one. Okay. I'm hoping you understood that. You may wonder why the blue or the holes changes year to year. So what I would say is this: the technology that they are using to disqualify cases before the cases actually are announced, before the winners are announced in May. The technology has improved year to year to year. And so, for example, now, these days, they have technology that has facial recognition, that even if you took two different pictures of the same person, their systems could figure out that is the same person, even if they were different pictures with different clothes on, different poses, slightly different facial expression. Their system can actually recognize people with two different photos, right? And so they didn't have that 10 years ago. They didn't have that probably in DV2018. They also have much better data mining capabilities and data intelligence capabilities to build up a picture of who knows whom, right? So over a period of years, they've been building this database of all these entries, 20 million entries a year. And everyone says, everyone's giving information year to year about who they are, who they're married to, who their kids are, and so on. And that information, that data is all building up. And the government is now able to use that information in order to go through and do background checking on their cases and connect the dots between who knows who should know who, compared to what they said in a previous year's entry, for example. And so they're building much better technology. So that means that in 2018, they didn't disqualify many cases at all prior to the announcement of the results. And then as we go through the years, you can see almost that the technology improves. Ignore that year for a minute, but the technology improves to disqualify more cases, and until we get to the point where we're at now, where the number of cases that are disqualified is far more than the number of cases that are allowed to become the winners, right? So, and again, as I have to say, I know people get upset about this one also. Your case number, if you've got a case number, your case number is not a whole. If you've got a case number, it means you went through that initial screening process and you've passed, right? If you've got a case number, you don't have to worry that your case number is a whole. A case number which is a whole saw the words not selected when they went in to check their win, the same as any other case number or any other entry that wasn't selected, right? The government doesn't say you've been disqualified. You were case number Africa 1, but we disqualified you. They don't say that. They just tell people you are not selected, right? So you don't have to worry about whether your number is a whole. And all of the holes were created prior to the May announcement of results, right? So none of those people were holes. Okay. All right. So let me just quickly address this year. This year is slightly weird DV2020 was a bit weird. There's a couple of weird things about it. Number one, the number of holes is a very high percentage, and number two, there are no cliffs, which is pretty odd. It's a very low selection year, and all I can say is I think that is probably when they went through a fairly significant technology change that disqualified a lot of cases. But to the point where they didn't ever go to the numbers of selectees that would require cliffs. It's only in sort of slightly larger selection years where they say and the cliffs are created because they have a lot of entries from one particular country, let's say, or two particular countries in a region. And as they're going through, they get to a point where there are so many selectees from that country that they actually just stop taking selectees from that country, and they limit that country during the draw process. There are still entries in there, but we see the cliffs because they stop taking people from that country. That's why we have that graduation, that sort of gradual and sometimes cliffy graduation of the density going down in later number ranges, right? That's why we have it. It's because of limited countries. In a situation like DV2020, where the selectee counts were so low, that wasn't really a concern, and that's why we didn't, for Africa, we didn't see any of those cliffs really. We just see a very slight decrease towards the end, but it's almost not noticeable. So that was an unusual year, but the technology that they employed changes year to year, and obviously the entries change year to year. So that's why we get a slightly different sort of result all the time. Okay, so hoping that makes sense to you. I'm hoping that that's answering the questions that I'm getting from people on this topic and makes it a little bit more clear. But if there is a big takeaway here, it's we don't have enough data right now to make decisions to say which case numbers are safe and not safe. I have previously said that if you're in a case number range, which is about half of the range that we know exists in each of the regions, then you can sort of assume your case number is pretty safe, because I don't think they've selected double the number of people they need. But outside of that, we might make some guesses based on the case numbers we're seeing, but it's really not it's not anything that we can do with good predictability. So we need to all just sort of be patient until we see the visa bulletin published in July or August, which gives us the number of selectees per country and therefore per region, and then we'll know much more. Okay. All right, everybody, I think that's about all I wanted to cover with you today. Please do let me know if you've got any ideas of videos you would like to see, any questions that you have. Happy to do them, whether it's for DV2024, which is still currently happening, or DV2025. Happy to create the videos and answer your questions. Please do also take a moment to let me know what you think of the video. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down, and make sure you're subscribed to my channel, please. Thank you. All right, have a great day. Bye-bye.